The merchant wants to sell whiskey. To the mountain man, he chose the obese girl instead. The spring thaw of 1884 brought Solomon Creek back to life, its waters rushing down from the Rockies with a fury that spoke of winter's retreat. The settlement that bore the creek's name consisted of little more than a trading post, a blacksmith's forge, and a scattering of rough cabins clinging to the mountainside like barnacles on a ship's hull. It was here that Marcus Webb had established his mercantile 3 years prior, determined to make his fortune supplying trappers, prospectors, and the occasional desperate soul who wandered too far from civilization. Marcus was a pragmatic man with keen brown eyes and prematurely graying hair, the result of too many anxious nights calculating profits and losses. His store stood as the finest building in Solomon Creek, 2 stories of hewn logs with real glass windows shipped all the way from St. Louis. The bottom floor housed his merchandise, traps, ammunition, preserved foods, tobacco, and most lucratively, whiskey. The top floor served as his living quarters, where his daughter Beatrice spent her days in isolation. Beatrice Webb was 23 years old, though the mountain isolation made her feel ancient. She possessed her late mother's delicate features, high cheekbones, full lips, and expressive hazel eyes, but her body had grown to proportions that horrified her father. At nearly 300 pounds, she struggled with the narrow staircases and found herself increasingly confined to the upper floor. Her father never spoke of it directly, but she saw the disappointment in his eyes, the way he flinched when she descended the stairs to help in the store, the hurried manner in which he ushered her back upstairs when customers arrived. The whiskey trade had been good that year. Marcus had acquired 20 cases of Kentucky bourbon from a supplier in Denver, and he intended to sell every bottle at an outrageous markup to the mountain men who came down from their trap lines each spring. The profit would be substantial enough to perhaps relocate to a proper town, somewhere Beatrice might be hidden away more easily, or so he hoped. It was on a Wednesday morning, with fog still clinging to the valley floor, that Isaiah Blackwood rode into Solomon Creek. His appearance caused an immediate stir among the handful of residents. Mountain men were common enough, but Isaiah was a legend, a man who had spent 15 consecutive winters in the high peaks, who knew every game trail and hidden valley for 200 miles, whose beaver pelts were so expertly prepared that traders fought over them. He was a giant of a man, standing well over 6 feet with shoulders that seemed capable of bearing the weight of the mountains themselves. His face was weathered to the color of saddle leather, framed by a thick black beard shot through with premature silver. He wore buckskins so well made they appeared almost elegant, decorated with intricate quill work that suggested the touch of a skilled craftsman. 2 pack horses followed his spotted Appaloosa, loaded with the winter's catch. Marcus stood in his doorway, mentally calculating the value of those pelts and the whiskey he could sell to secure them. "Mr. Blackwood," he called out, his voice carrying the obsequious tone he reserved for valuable customers. "Welcome back to civilization, such as it is." Isaiah dismounted with the fluid grace of a man half his age and tied his horses to the hitching post. "Webb," he acknowledged with a curt nod. His voice was deep and rough from disuse, each word carefully chosen. "Need supplies, standard list, and news if you have any worth sharing." Of course. Please come inside." Marcus practically vibrated with anticipation. This was his moment, the sale that would make his entire year profitable. "I've recently acquired some exceptional bourbon, Kentucky stock, aged 12 years. I thought a man such as yourself, after a long winter, might appreciate—" "No whiskey," Isaiah interrupted, his ice-blue eyes sweeping across the store's interior with professional assessment. "Need flour, salt, coffee, gunpowder, and lead. Got a list." Marcus felt his carefully constructed sales pitch crumble. "Surely a celebratory drink." I don't drink spirits." Isaiah's tone carried in finality that discouraged further argument. He produced a folded piece of paper from his possibles bag and laid it on the counter. "This is what I need. I'll pay fair price in pelts or coin, your choice." From the top of the stairs, Beatrice had heard the commotion and crept to the landing where she could peer down through the railing without being seen. She had heard stories of Isaiah Blackwood, the hermit who preferred mountains to men, who some claimed could speak to animals, who had once walked 50 miles through a blizzard to return a lost child to her family. The reality of him took her breath away, not because of his imposing physical presence, but because of the absolute stillness that surrounded him. In a world of men who filled every silence with bluster and noise, here was someone who understood the value of quiet. Marcus's face had reddened with frustration. He glanced at the list, mentally tabulating a paltry profit compared to what those whiskey cases would bring. "Mr. Blackwood, I must insist, that is, as a businessman, I have a substantial investment in premium spirits. Perhaps if you understood the quality—" "I understand quality fine," Isaiah said, his patience visibly thinning. "I also understand my needs. You want to fill this order, or should I try my luck at the next trading post?" The next trading post was 80 miles away, and Marcus knew it. He also knew that Isaiah's pelts would fetch premium prices and that other trappers would follow wherever Isaiah traded. Desperation crept into his voice. What if I were to offer an incentive, something of value beyond mere merchandise? Isaiah's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." Marcus hesitated, his mind racing through possibilities. What could he offer that would appeal to a man who shunned civilization? His gaze drifted upward, almost unconsciously, toward the ceiling where he knew Beatrice was listening. An terrible idea began to form. Terrible, desperate, and just mad enough that it might work. "My daughter," Marcus heard himself say, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Beatrice, she's a good girl, educated, can read and write, knows medicinal herbs, can cook, sew, keep accounts. A man alone in the mountains might benefit from—" "You're offering to sell your daughter?" Isaiah's voice could have frozen the creek solid in midsummer. No, of course not," Marcus backpedaled frantically, though in truth that was exactly what he had been suggesting. "I mean to say, a marriage arrangement, completely respectable. She would be well cared for, and you would receive her dowry, which would include a substantial supply of whiskey for trade or personal use. Enough to make you a wealthy man if you chose to." "Where is she?" Isaiah's question cut through Marcus's babbling like an axe through kindling. "Upstairs. But she's not. That is, you should understand, she's—" Marcus struggled to find words that wouldn't damn the sale entirely. "She's substantial. In size, I mean. Not what most men would consider. Bring her down." Marcus's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. "I'm not certain that's—" "You offered her. I want to see what I'm rejecting." "Bygone." Isaiah's bluntness was almost refreshing in its cruelty. Upstairs, Beatrice felt her cheeks burn with humiliation so intense it was physically painful. Of course he would want to see the merchandise before refusing it. Of course her father would try to trade her like a case of whiskey, perhaps worth less. She considered staying hidden, pretending she hadn't heard, but something in Isaiah's tone, a hint of curiosity beneath the gruffness, made her rise to her feet. The stairs creaked ominously under her weight as she descended. She had dressed that morning in her most practical clothes, a simple gray dress that accommodated her size without drawing attention to it, and had pinned her light brown hair back severely. She would not pretend to be something she wasn't. When she reached the bottom of the stairs and stepped into the store's main room, she forced herself to look directly at Isaiah Blackwood. Let him see what her father was so ashamed of. Let him reject her quickly so this humiliation could end. Isaiah studied her with the same careful attention he had given the merchandise on the shelves. His expression revealed nothing, no disgust, no pity, no amusement. After a long moment, he spoke. You know about medicinal herbs? The question caught her off guard. Yes. My mother taught me before she passed. I know what grows in these mountains, what can treat fever, infection, stomach ailments. I've read several medical texts that Father ordered. Can you ride a horse? I haven't in some years, but I used to. Before, she gestured vaguely at herself. Can you shoot? Adequately. Father taught me to handle a rifle for protection when he travels for supplies. Isaiah nodded slowly, then turned to Marcus. I'll take her instead of the whiskey. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to pause in disbelief. What? Marcus stammered. Your daughter, I'll take her as wife. In exchange, you keep your whiskey and give me the supplies on my list at cost, plus $100 in coin for the wedding expenses and to set up proper housekeeping. I'll return in 1 month to collect her. That gives you time to prepare whatever she needs to bring and gives her time to decide if she's willing. Beatrice found her voice, anger overriding shock. Don't I have a say in this transaction? Isaiah turned his full attention to her for the first time, and she was startled by the depth of intelligence in those blue eyes. You have the only say that matters. I'm proposing marriage, not purchase. You can refuse. But before you do, understand what I'm offering. A cabin in the high valley, good hunting, clean water, and solitude. I'm gone on trap lines for weeks at a time. You'd have freedom most women never know. I don't talk much, don't drink, and don't raise my hand in anger. I need someone who can tend the garden, preserve meat, and keep the cabin livable while I'm working my lines. In return, you'd have protection, provision, and peace. Why? The question burst from her. Why would you choose this? Because your father was right about one thing. I could use help, but I don't need whiskey. Already have enough vices without adding that one. And because I saw you listening from upstairs, you were quiet. Most people can't manage that. Quiet is valuable where I live, Marcus interjected, sensing his whiskey sales slipping away. Now see here, we haven't discussed terms properly. The dowry alone. The terms are what I stated, Isaiah said flatly. Miss Webb has 1 month to decide. I'll return on the 28th of May. If she agrees, we marry. If not, I take my trade elsewhere, and we never speak of this again. He turned back to Beatrice. You don't know me, and I don't know you. But I'm honest, which is more than most can claim. Think on it. B. Without waiting for a response, he collected his list from the counter and walked out, leaving Marcus sputtering protests about lost profits, and Beatrice standing frozen in the center of the store, her mind reeling. That night, alone in her room, Beatrice tried to process what had happened. She had been offered as barter, treated like inventory, and yet somehow Isaiah Blackwood had transformed the transaction into something that almost resembled respect. He had asked about her skills, not her appearance. He had offered her choice when her father would have forced a sale. But marriage to a mountain hermit, living in isolation miles from any other human being? It sounded like a prison. Then again, wasn't she already in a prison? Confined to the upper floor, hidden from customers, a source of shame to her only living relative? At least Isaiah's prison came with mountains and freedom to move without judgment. The month that followed was torture. Marcus alternated between trying to convince her to accept, think of the respectability, the financial relief, and suggesting she refuse so he could push the whiskey deal instead. The few other women in Solomon Creek came to visit, full of gossip and unsolicited advice. Isaiah Blackwood was dangerous, they said, unpredictable. No woman had lasted more than a season with the mountain men who lived like him. But one old trapper, a man called Gideon, who had known Isaiah for years, told her something different. Isaiah's mother was Shoshone, he said, sitting on the porch of the trading post with his pipe. His father was a missionary who loved her true. When she died bringing Isaiah into the world, his father raised him with both their ways, taught him to read from the Bible and to hunt from the saddle. When his father died, Isaiah was 16. He went to the mountains and never really came back. But he's a good man, Miss Webb. Better than most. Keeps his word like it's sacred. If he said he'd provide for you, he will. If he said he won't hurt you, he won't. Beatrice walked the paths around Solomon Creek, such as they were, and thought about her life. 23 years old and already written off as unmarriageable. Her father saw her as a burden, a failed investment. The women of the settlement pitied her at best, mocked her when they thought she couldn't hear. She had no future here except slow suffocation. What did she want? The question was so novel that it took her days to even begin answering it. She wanted to be useful. She wanted her knowledge and skills to matter. She wanted to exist without constant judgment. She wanted to see if she could be brave. When Isaiah Blackwood rode back into Solomon Creek on the 28th of May, exactly as promised, Beatrice was waiting with her answer. She had packed 2 trunks with practical items, clothes, books, medical supplies, seeds for a garden. She wore her traveling dress, the most durable one she owned, and had braided her hair for the journey. Isaiah dismounted and approached her directly, ignoring Marcus, who hovered anxiously nearby. "You've decided?" "I have questions first," Beatrice said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Ask them." "Will you expect intimacy immediately?" "No, we're strangers. That sort of thing should wait until it's wanted by both parties, not just legal right." "What if I can't do the work? What if I'm too weak or too slow?" "Then we figure out what you can do and make it work. I'm not expecting you to become a mountain man, Miss Webb. I'm expecting you to be yourself, just in a different location." "What if I hate it? What if I want to leave?" Isaiah was quiet for a long moment. "Then I'll bring you back, or to wherever you want to go. I won't keep you against your will, but I'd ask that you give it a fair chance. Say 3 months. Winter comes early where we're headed. If you want to leave, better to do it before the snows trap us." Beatrice took a deep breath. "Then yes, I'll marry you." The wedding was performed that afternoon by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through. It was a simple ceremony, witnessed by Gideon and 2 other trappers, with Marcus hovering in the background, looking relieved and calculating his profits. Beatrice wore the same traveling dress. Isaiah had at least changed into a clean shirt. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaiah didn't kiss her. He simply nodded once and said, "We should leave while there's light. It's a 3-day journey." Those 3 days tested Beatrice in ways she hadn't anticipated. Isaiah had brought a sturdy mare for her to ride, a calm-tempered creature named Dove. The first day's ride was agony. Muscles she hadn't used in years screamed in protest, and she had to stop frequently to rest. Isaiah showed no impatience. He simply waited, checking his horse's hooves or studying the terrain until she was ready to continue. They camped that night by a stream. Isaiah set up a simple camp with practiced efficiency, starting a fire, tending the horses, and preparing a basic meal of bacon and beans. Beatrice helped where she could, feeling painfully useless but determined to try. "You did well today," Isaiah said as they ate in the gathering darkness. It was the first unprompted thing he had said to her since they left. "I slowed you down terribly." "You kept going, that's what matters." He fed another branch to the fire. "Tomorrow will be harder. The trail gets steep, but we'll manage." "Why are you being kind to me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Isaiah looked at her across the fire, his face shadowed and unreadable. "Why wouldn't I be? You're my wife now. That means something where I come from. I'm not what you could have had. You could have taken the whiskey, traded for money, found someone beautiful." "Beautiful is common as creek stones," Isaiah interrupted, "and whiskey makes men stupid. I made a choice that benefits us both. Let's leave it at that." But Beatrice couldn't leave it. As they sat in companionable silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest, she realized that he had given her something precious: dignity. He had taken what her father meant as an insult, and transformed it into a legitimate choice. The second day was indeed harder. The trail climbed sharply, winding through dense pine forests and across rocky outcroppings. Beatrice's legs trembled with exhaustion, and her back ached from the unaccustomed riding. Twice she slid from the saddle, too tired to stay mounted. The second time, Isaiah caught her before she could fall. "Need to stop for the day?" he asked. Beatrice wanted to say yes, wanted to curl up and weep from pain and weariness. But she thought of all the times she had given up, all the times she had accepted limitation. "How much farther to the next camp?" 2 hours at our current pace." "Then let's continue." Something flickered in Isaiah's eyes, approval, perhaps, or respect. He helped her back onto Dove, and they pressed on. That night, as Beatrice soaked her aching feet in the cold stream water, Isaiah surprised her by speaking more than he had in the previous 2 days combined. He told her about the valley where they were headed, about the cabin his father had built and he had expanded. He described the meadows that filled with wildflowers in summer, the elk that passed through in autumn, the absolute silence of winter snow. He spoke with a quiet passion that transformed his usually gruff manner, and Beatrice found herself genuinely curious about this isolated place. "What do you do all winter?" she asked. "When you're snowed in?" "Read, mostly. Fix equipment. Prepare pelts. Think." He paused. "Gets lonely sometimes. But it's a clean lonely, if that makes sense. Better than being lonely in a crowd." Beatrice understood exactly what he meant. They reached the valley on the third day, in late afternoon when the light turned everything golden. The trail crested a ridge, and suddenly the world opened up before them. A high mountain valley, perhaps 2 miles across, cradled by soaring peaks still crowned with snow. A creek sparkled through the center, and the cabin stood on a slight rise overlooking it all. The cabin was larger than Beatrice had expected, well built from hewn logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. A garden plot had been fenced near the house, and several outbuildings suggested storage and workspace. It looked solid, permanent, and unexpectedly inviting. "Welcome home," Isaiah said simply. The word, home, struck Beatrice with unexpected force. She had lived in her father's house, but it had never been home. Not really. This place, wild and remote and completely foreign, somehow felt more welcoming in its first glimpse than 23 years in Solomon Creek. The weeks that followed established their rhythm. Isaiah had been truthful about his absences. He left for days at a time to check his trap lines and hunt. Beatrice used his absences to explore the valley, to learn its geography and inhabitants. She discovered patches of medicinal herbs her mother had taught her about, and some she had only read of. She planted the garden seeds she had brought, coaxing vegetables from the mountain soil. The physical work was brutal at first. Her body, softened by years of limited activity, rebelled against the constant demands. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, she grew stronger. Carrying water from the creek, chopping wood for the stove, working the garden, each task built muscle and endurance. She began to move with less effort, to breathe without wheezing, to sleep deeply and wake refreshed. Isaiah kept his word about intimacy. He slept in the main room while she occupied the small bedroom. But they fell into an easy companionship. He taught her to shoot more accurately, to read weather signs, to distinguish between animal tracks. She taught him about the herbs she found, how to treat common ailments, and read to him in the evenings from the books she had brought. One evening in early July, as they sat on the porch watching stars emerge, Isaiah said, "You're different than when we married." Beatrice tensed, expecting criticism. "How so?" "Stronger, more confident. You stand straighter." He paused. "You smile more." She realized with a start that it was true. Somewhere in the past weeks she had stopped hunching her shoulders, stopped making herself small. There was no one here to judge her appearance, no disapproving eyes tracking her every movement. "I think I'm happier," she admitted. "Good." Isaiah's voice carried a warmth she hadn't heard before. That was part of the deal, after all. peace. As summer progressed, their relationship deepened in small, significant ways. Isaiah began seeking her advice on practical matters: where to expand the garden, how to treat a wound on one of his horses, whether a particular area looked suitable for setting traps. Beatrice discovered she had opinions, knowledge, and the confidence to voice them. More surprisingly, Isaiah listened and often took her advice. She also discovered that her husband was not the taciturn hermit she had first assumed. He spoke little around others, but in the privacy of their valley, he shared stories of his childhood, his parents, his years in the mountains. He had a dry humor that caught her off guard with its unexpected appearances. And when he focused his attention on something, fixing a broken tool, tracking an animal, listening to her read, he gave it his complete presence in a way she found both flattering and unnerving. By August, Beatrice had lost considerable weight, though she remained substantially larger than convention deemed acceptable. But she no longer thought about it constantly. Her worth here was measured in tangible contributions: the vegetables growing in neat rows, the preserved meats hanging in the smokehouse, the increasingly organized cabin. Isaiah never commented on her changing appearance, treating her with the same steady respect he had shown from the beginning. One afternoon, while Isaiah was working on repairing a trap and Beatrice was harvesting herbs, a sudden summer storm rolled over the mountain. They ran for the cabin as rain poured from black clouds, reaching the porch just as lightning split the sky. They stood there, breathless and laughing at the near miss, and Beatrice realized Isaiah was looking at her with an expression she had never seen before. Not desire exactly, but something warmer, more personal. Before she could second-guess herself, she reached up and kissed him. For a heartbeat, Isaiah went completely still. Then his arms came around her, gentle despite their strength, and he kissed her back. It wasn't passionate or desperate, but it was real, an acknowledgement of the connection they had built. When they separated, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "Wasn't expecting that," he admitted. "Neither was I," Beatrice said, "but I wanted to. Is that all right?" "More than all right." His voice had gone rough in a different way. "Should have asked before. Do you want to change our sleeping arrangements?" Beatrice considered. "Not yet, but soon, I think. When winter comes. It seems right to wait for winter." Isaiah smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his weathered face. "Winter it is." The remaining weeks of summer passed in a golden haze of work and growing intimacy. They were not demonstrative, neither of them were comfortable with excessive displays of affection, but the bond between them strengthened daily. Isaiah began taking her on longer expeditions to teach her more about the valley and the surrounding territory. Beatrice continued her studies of mountain plants and wildlife, creating detailed notes that Isaiah read with genuine interest. When the first snow fell in late October, blanketing the valley in pristine white, it felt like nature's blessing on what they had built. That night, Beatrice moved her things into the main room. Their consummation of the marriage was tender and unhurried, two people discovering each other without shame or judgment. Winter settled in like a comfortable blanket. They were snowed in for weeks at a time, and Beatrice discovered that the isolation she had feared was actually liberating. They read together, told stories, worked on individual projects in companionable silence. Isaiah began teaching her to work leather, while she taught him more advanced reading skills. They played card games by firelight and planned improvements for the spring. One evening in February, with wind howling outside and the fire crackling warmly, Beatrice looked up from her book to find Isaiah watching her with that same expression she had seen during the summer storm: warm, appreciative, content. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just thinking about your father's whiskey offer," Isaiah said. "Best deal I never made. Chose right that day." "You did," Beatrice agreed, though I'm not sure either of us knew it at the time. "I knew." Isaiah's certainty was absolute. "Saw you standing straight, looking me in the eye, even though you were mortified. Saw courage. That's worth more than any amount of whiskey. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears, grateful tears. I'm glad you saw that. I'm glad you chose me. I'd choose you again, Isaiah said simply. Every time. She. As spring returned to the valley, bringing with it new life and endless possibilities, Beatrice and Isaiah stood together on their porch, watching the snow melt and the creek swell with runoff. They had built something real here, a marriage based not on conventional attraction or social necessity, but on mutual respect, shared purpose, and genuine affection. Beatrice thought briefly of her father, probably still peddling his whiskey in Solomon Creek, and felt no bitterness. His desperate attempt to unload an unwanted daughter had actually given her the greatest gift imaginable, the chance to discover who she truly was and what she was truly capable of. She reached for Isaiah's hand, and he took it, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. No words were necessary. They had found their place, their peace, their home, and that was worth infinitely more than all the whiskey in the territory.